I have here a dual telescope rig, or a dual barrel telescope, or a Frankenscope, whatever you want to call it. We have one 6-inch Newtonian telescope here with an APS-C size sensor camera and an autofocuser. We have a second 6-inch Newtonian telescope with an APS-C size sensor camera and an autofocuser. All of this is mounted on my robust Warp Astron WD-20. And I've had a video where I described how I put all of this Frankenscope together from a hardware perspective as well as from a software perspective. The only thing that was waiting for me is to have the first light with the Frankenscope. It's not the first light for either of the telescopes, but it was the first light for the dual barrel setup, which was very exciting. Now, as I mentioned in the previous video, we had some issues to overcome. In particular, we wanted to make sure that the two telescopes were pointed basically at the same target, right? Any slight misalignment between the two telescopes would make them point at something different. So what I did is I obviously pointed the main telescope, the master scope is this one, the red, beautiful, sexy one. And I pointed it at a bright star, and I centered the bright star in the field of view of the camera that we have here. And then I looked at what the field of view looked like on the camera here. And of course, they were misaligned, but not by that much. We were losing maybe like 2/3 only on the image of the second camera. And so obviously I needed to fix that. And so what I did is nothing, absolutely nothing. I don't have any way to fix that right now because I have no idea with the equipment I have how I can align those telescopes together. I would need to buy like what ADM accessories called an XY guider, I think, or something like that, something where I can change the azimuth and the altitude of the secondary or primary telescopes so we can align them together. But, you know, the bright star was in the field of view of both cameras. That was a win. That means that targets that don't have that are not very large in my field of view with the two focal lengths that I have here, well, they're fair game. And so I decided I wanted to use my current benchmark, which is M63, the Sunflower Galaxy, to image using those two telescopes. And I wanted to keep it simple as well by just imaging with UV-IR cut filter, nothing else, no narrowband, nothing fancy, just 30-second exposures. That way, other ugly problems like flexure between the two telescopes would not manifest, or not in any way that bothers us. And I wanted to keep the first step, first light, as simple as possible. And so I pointed at M63 and I took 30-second exposures for a whole night on both telescopes at the same time, the whole Frankenscope at work. And then there was a second night which had good weather, so I took a second night of data, 30-second exposures with both telescopes. So I ended up with 1,240 frames. APS-C size, so very large resolution frames, 50 megabytes each, 1,240 frames of each across those two nights. That is a lot of data. And then, of course, I had some data from last year using this telescope on the same galaxy, so I wanted to merge all of this fun stuff together. There are some obstacles to merging all of that. One of those obstacles is that this thing with the focal reducer that is installed has a focal length of 580 millimeters, and that one has a focal length of roughly 517 millimeters, as I recall. So we don't have exactly the same zoom level between the two cameras. Although, to be honest, that doesn't really matter because we'll be doing some star alignment in PixInsight, and PixInsight can take care of that, of small differences in field of view and zoom level really very easily, and that's what we'll do. But then my next step, I needed to stack all of this in PixInsight. So if I wanted to stack all of the frames, all of the 2,480 frames together in one go, I would have needed 1.7 terabytes of free hard disk space by using PixInsight. I did not have any hard disk with that much free space, so I didn't do that. Instead, I stacked 620 frames from this telescope into one master image, then 620 other frames of that same telescope into another master frame, then 620 frames from this telescope, then 620 frames again from that telescope. So now we are ending up with 4 master frames that we need to merge together, plus another master frame from an image of M63 that I had taken last year. Although last year I had been smarter, instead of 30-second exposures, I had taken 120-second exposures. So I didn't have as many to stack, and the stacking was much easier. So each subgroup of 620 exposures, or 610, don't quote me on that, 600-ish exposures took me around 4 to 5 hours to stack, and it took roughly 430 gigabytes of working space. So maybe my 1.7 terabyte statement earlier was not quite accurate, but details. And now I am all ready to merge everything together, and of course I'll be doing it with you using PixInsight as software. I will first also show you how Nina looked like after those 2 nights of imaging on the Frankenscope, so you can see the details about the synchronized dithering and things like what happened during the meridian flip. So let's get inside and have a look together. So first, we want to look at Nina and how the actual imaging went. So Nina is the control center that I'm using to control the 2 separate scopes of my overall Frankenscope, the double barrel telescope. And we can see this is a screenshot at the very end of those 2 nights of imaging. So this is the last frame taken, and it is very interesting to see that my galaxy, that faint blob here at the center, is M63, the Sunflower Galaxy. It's a very tiny target. You'll see in a moment while I do the processing. But you can see it is perfectly centered. And also at the bottom, we can see the guide graph at the very end of the second night. This is typically when the guiding graph is the worst possible, because we have to image through the thicker atmosphere that's close to the horizon. Still, 0.93 arc seconds is a pretty decent result, and I was consistently getting something like 0.4, 0.5 in the middle of the night. And what I also like to look at the end of my sessions, and it's very interesting for us as well, is the number of stars that were detected in each frame. This is the yellow curve, as well as the half flux radius of the stars. This is the green curve. So the number of stars detected in the image, and the half flux radius is basically telling you the size of the stars, or how blurry the stars are effectively. And invariably, at least in light polluted areas like here in Tokyo, especially with poor seeing, again, unfortunately, like here in Tokyo, we have an invert smile here, like a frown on this yellow area for 1 night. So you can see here we have very clearly 2 nights, first night, second night, and then we have a normal smile with the HFR, and this is due to the fact that the target is gradually going towards the highest point it transits through in the sky at the meridian, and that's where it is outside of the Tokyo smog, right? So we can see the most stars in the frame, and then it goes back down towards the horizon into the smog, etc. And then the second night, we see actually fewer stars, so we can think that the conditions were actually less good than on the first night. I love looking at these simple graphs because it tells you a lot about your imaging session. In particular, you can see at the very start of the first night, we have a very strong or very quick increase of number of stars detected, and much more abrupt than like the decrease we see later in the night. This is a sign of some poor conditions at the start of the night, and I could probably be rejecting or deleting all of those frames corresponding to here. This is confirmed by my HFR, which is weirdly low. It should be higher. This is something that that's an outlier. Something went weird there. But you can see the HFR because of the atmospheric turbulence that is higher when you have to go through more atmosphere. When the target is closer to the horizon, we get the smile over the 2 nights as expected. Okay, so this is for the session from the master telescope. And by the way, overall, everything went swimmingly. No issues whatsoever, which was awesome. I did have issues on the later nights, but that was actually linked to a cable. I'll probably make a video about that later on. So make sure to be subscribed to the channel if you want to see that. It was very, very frustrating, and the solution was very interesting. So yeah, subscribe while you're going there, like the video. Leave a comment. What do you think of this Frankenscope and the first light? Do you think it's going to be successful? Let me know. And if you want to support the channel more directly and you're planning on buying anything from Agena Astro, High Point Scientific, First Light Optics, or even Amazon for that matter, if you do so after clicking the links that I have down in the description, it really helps me out at no cost to you. And if you want to help me even more directly and you want to have more clear skies guaranteed, You can join my Patreon as a paid member, link in the description, or join my YouTube channel as a member. It's the little join button next to the subscribe button. You guys, thank you so much. I mean, you make the channel possible. I wouldn't be going on without you guys. So again, thank you so much. Anyway, let's go back to our video where we want to also look at the secondary telescope that I had, which is the Skywatcher Quattro 150p. Mounted side by side on the Frankenscope. So here, obviously it wasn't guiding, so we don't have any guiding figures, but let's look at the main frame, and you can see that the blob here is M63. It is not in the center. This is exactly as expected, but fortunately, because I have an APS-C size field of view, it's not such a big issue, and we'll be able to make something out of it. And on this particular telescope, interestingly enough, the HFR, maybe it's too compressed for us to see what's happening, doesn't have the same smile as I had with the carbon star, so I'm not sure what's up with that. But also, we see the number of stars is having our two frowns there, just like before, and we can see the second night, just like on the carbon star, had less good conditions than the first night. It's always very interesting to look at that. But at the same time, you can see we have a spike downwards with 3 effective frames on the first night, 4 effective frames on the second night. And this is because while we did synchronized dithering between the two telescopes, we did not do anything about the meridian flip. So the master telescope ordered a meridian flip. The secondary telescope, this one, had no idea about it, so it just kept imaging. And so, of course, you have frames with trailing stars, a number of stars that is very low, and the registration, like the star alignment of those frames, will fail, so we can just completely ignore them and stack as usual. So that is how things looked like in Nina, in the control software, and during like those 2 sessions, 2 nights in a row, without, surprisingly, any issues. For the first light of a Frankenscope, I'm disappointed that there were not more issues. Fortunately, the cable issue I had later made up for that and more. Okay, let's go to the processing. I've already done all of the stacking, but let's look at the results of that. Okay, and I have opened the 4 frames on my computer, CS1 for Carbon Star 1, Carbon Star 2, Quattro 1, Quattro 2. So we have 4 stack frames from 2 nights of imaging and 4 stacked frames simply because I simply did not have enough disk space to stack the Carbon Star frames all at once and the Quattro frames all at once. So we do have like 4 different images to take care of. Obviously, they're currently in a linear stage, so we cannot see really what's happening. And I've also drizzled the image, so we have a higher resolution. We can downsample later on after I've applied a blur exterminator. Now I want to quickly have a look at how the image looks like from the Quattro, because this is the secondary scope. And it's going to be very interesting to see that there's this square there. So this area tells us the area that we are losing by having the misalignment between the Carbon Star telescope and the Quattro telescope. So we have this weird, interesting shape there that is due to the meridian flip, and that's perfectly normal. So very interesting to see that. But the first thing that I want to do before I even like open all of those images and see what the results are, we want to do some star alignment on all of those. So I'm going to open up the star alignment process in PixInsight and say my reference image will be CS1 and CS2, Q1 and Q2 need to be registered. Okay, and I can just apply that. And here the process is done. We have the 3 registered images, except I forgot there's one more night of imaging from last year that I want to put in. So I am going to open this thing here, this image from last year, drizzled 2 times. Here it is. I'm going to call it, let's say, old. And I am going to do this registration with old as well. And we are done. I've also iconized the images that we no longer need. And I'm going to open any of those. Now they are star aligned to one another. We can stack them together. You can see the old one had weird like light patterns, but that's not a big deal. We're just going to crop the image on all of those samples that we have to something fairly close to the center. Actually, I should probably use one of the Quattro images because that's where I want to make sure that we don't include any of the wrong, let's say the unstacked field of view. So here we have a quattro image. I'm going to go to dynamic crop. I'm going to choose my crop. Something like this looks fun. And now I want to apply this crop to all of our images. So we're going to apply it to old registered. We're going to apply it to Q2 registered. We're going to apply it to C2 registered. We're going to apply it to CS1, not registered because it was the original frame. And then I'm going to validate on Q1 registered. Okay, so now we have all of the images aligned to one another and cropped to the same field of view. I'm still not really looking at them because I'm gonna really put them together very soon. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to do a quick Graxpert on them. So Graxpert, we're gonna do a background extraction with the maximum smoothing, and we are gonna replace the image. I'm gonna run that without even looking at the images because it's a simple galaxy. Graxpert can take care of that on each of the images. This is effectively me performing somewhat of a local normalization on the images before stacking those master images together. Okay, we are done on all of the images. I'm still not really looking at them. I just want to stack them together. So all of the images are ready. What do I need to do next? Now I need to figure out how I want to stack them. I could remove the stars from all of the images and keep only the stars from one. But actually, because I see the spikes between the old one, the Q1, and also CS1, CS2, when I look at them, the star spikes are in the same direction. I'm just going to add them to one another. Before that, I'm not completely sure if it's necessary, but I feel like I want to do a linear fit between those frames so that they have kind of the same luminosity between them. So I'm going to choose the CS1 as the reference image, and we're going to quickly apply on all of the others a linear fit so they have the same level of brightness effectively as CS1. And that might be important when I assign weights to each of the images when I stack them together effectively. Okay, the linear fit has been done on all of the images. Now I want to determine which relative weights I'm going to apply to each image when I stack all of those 5 images together. So I'm gonna quickly do a screen transfer function to now finally look at all of the images that we have. And we can rank them in terms of which ones to me look better. In theory, I should be using something like a subframe selector to decide, which image has the most stars, or the better full width, half max, or that kind of stuff. But I can see that CS1, Q1, Q2, CS2, they're all very similar. So they're probably all going to have the same weight. And the old one that I have, I feel is noticeably worse in terms of signal to noise ratio and in terms of detail. So I will lower the weight for this one. So maybe I'll have what? Maybe something like 0.22 as a weight for all of my images taken recently. And for the old one, maybe 0.16 as a weight there. We could even go 0.22 and 0.12. That might be better. Let's do that. So for that, I'm going to open our favorite process, which is Pixel Math. And because there's some long names to type, I'm going to go into the Pixel Math expression editor. And so we're going to have CS01 times 0.22. There we go. Plus CS2 registered times 0.22 plus old registered times 0.12 plus Q1 registered times 0.22 plus Q2 registered times 0.22. Now we have the weights there. So old is taking into account the least of all of the images. And I'm going to validate that. And I want to tell PixInsight that we're going to create a new image. And it is going to be our RGB color image. And we are going to apply this. And now I can iconize all of those images because we have finally our true master. And let's do a screen transfer function on the true master. And yeah, compared to any of the individual frames, especially if you look at the details here, it's very different. Look at the amount of additional details we get there. Even though it's Tokyo, there's no miracles, it's not going to be perfect. And now that we have everything combined, I can just do the processing as usual. So what I did is first another round of Graxpert to really reduce the background. Then I solved the image, and I did some color calibration, spectrophotometric color calibration. So we now have the right colors for the galaxy. And then comes the impressive stuff, blur exterminator. You can see before, after, it's not even a comparison, it's amazing. Okay, then next step, some noise exterminator, followed by a linked stretch. So we have now a stretched image. Then I remove the stars because we're going to do some curves effects. I really don't like doing curves there, but it's kind of necessary because the background is so bright. And yeah, it's still Tokyo, even with the equivalent of 5 nights actually, with the dual barrel scope. It's not perfect. So curves, then a mask where I will be playing with the saturation of the galaxy. As you can see, it's getting more and more saturated. And I will also desaturate the background of the image. And that leaves us here, where I noticed that it's really a lot of purple there. So what I'm going to do is invert the image, and you can see the purple becomes green. So then I can apply very slight SCNR to remove that green and invert it again. So now we have a less aggressive kind of purple. And then we can do a slight turn of noise exterminator, followed by replacing the stars into the image. And for good measure, I should have done this earlier, but we can do some HDR transform. So yeah, this is the amount of details that we get from Tokyo on this galaxy. We even have a tiny little couple of galaxies there as well. I'm really impressed that we get this like little ghost there, and the nebulosity around the galaxy, and the amount of details that we get within the galaxy. I'm pretty pleased with this image, even though obviously if I had been like in the middle of nowhere, it would have been so much more easier, right? So, but that's how it is. And tell me what you think. I'm gonna post that on Instagram. This is pretty cool. So what are your thoughts on this? Would you have processed this differently? How do you like this first light? Let me know down in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, buy my merch, pretty merch, link down in the description. And if you want to support as well, and you're planning on buying anything from Gina Astro, or First Light Optics, or Astro Shop, or High Point Scientific, then if you do so after clicking the links in the description, it helps me out. But more important than all of that, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, whenever you can, to look up at the stars, and I'll see you next time.